Hi, I'm counselor and Professor Rob Alexander, and today we're going to talk about the female anatomy. This is lecture 3, chapter 3. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, as we always do, as I'm talking, you will be taking notes. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So, what we hope to learn today is the female sex organs. What are they for? Female sexual physiology. Okay, now this is a brief overview for those of you that are going to go into the medical field, nursing. I highly recommend you take anatomy and physiology at a community college. Why at a community college? Because it's cheaper and you'll be learning the same stuff you're going to be learning at a 4-year college. So, female sex organs, what are they good for? All the basic body parts of a woman have not yet been mapped, especially in terms of the sexual response, right? So female sex organs do serve several clear functions: reproduction, nourishing the offspring during gestation via the placenta, and following birth via the breast through lactation. So clearly the female sex organs serve a reproduction function, but they perform other functions as well. Significant to nearly all women are the sexual parts that bring them pleasure. They may also serve to attract potential sexual partners. Because of the mutual pleasure partners give each other, we can see that sexual structures also serve an important role in human relations. So when we talk about relationships, it's demonstrating the affection through shared sexual pleasure and mutual sexual sharing. The external female genitals are known collectively as the vulva, right? The mons pubis is a pad of fatty tissue that covers the area of the pubic bone. The clitoris is the center of sexual arousal. The labia majora are two folds of spongy flesh extending from the mons pubis and enclosing the other external genitals. So the clitoris, that's pretty much its only function, and it has thousands upon thousands of nerve endings, twice as much as the glans penis. It's homologous to the glans penis, means that would be the area where the clitoris would be if you were a man, right? But that's its primarily function, is sexual satisfaction. The labia minora are smooth, hairless folds within the labia majora. So labia minora or labia minus, small, labia majora or labia major, big, right? That meet above the clitoris. The mons pubis or mons veneris is a patty fat of tissue that covers the area of the pubic bone about 6 inches below the navel. The clitoris, considered the center of sexual arousal. The glans clitoris is the same as the glans penis. It's homologous. The clitoral hood that's the covering of the glans clitoris. The crura and the corpora cavernosa. This is what makes up the external structures of the vulva. The labia majora are two folds of spongy flesh extending from the mons pubis and enclosing the labia minora, clitoris, right? It also encloses the urethral opening, which I'll demonstrate and show you guys on another video, and the vaginal entrance. The labia minora within the labia majora are smaller folds that meet above the clitoris to form the clitoral hood, the vestibule, Bartholin's glands. These excrete fluids during sexual excitement. So this right here is the embryonic fetal differentiation of the external reproductive organs. So female and male reproductive organs are formed from the same embryonic tissues, right? And embryos' external genitals are female in appearance until certain genetic and hormonal instructions signals the development of male organs. Within such instructions, the genitals continue to develop as female. So anatomically speaking, female, when their reproductive structures begin to develop, it does not receive certain genetic hormonal signals, then that fetus will continue to develop as a female. Right? In humans and most other mammals, the female, in addition to providing half the genetic instruction for the offspring, provides the environment in which it can develop until it becomes capable of surviving as a separate entity. This figure shows the external structures of the female genitals. At the top is the mons pubis in the form of a mound just above the clitoral hood. Below the clitoral hood is the glands of the clitoris. Below, which is the labia minora, which surrounds the urethral opening, the vestibule, and the vagina opening. Below the vagina opening are the ducts of Bartholin's glands, and around the Bartholin's gland is the labia major. Between the labia majora and the anus is the perineum. Whew. Try taking all that in. There's a lot of new words that are going to be coming at you if you are a bio major, anatomy major, then you've heard these before. So this figure right here shows the internal structures of the female genitals. Above the vagina and at the corner of the pubis and just below the suspensory ligament of the clitoris is the form of a thin tube-like structure. Below the suspensory ligament are the clitoris and two vertical oblong structures adjacent to each other, which are the corpora cavernosa of the clitoris. Below the corpora cavernosa of the clitoris is the clitoral hood, which covers glans clitoris. To the right of the clitoral hood is the long structure, which is the crura of the clitoris. Below the glans clitoris is a vertical oval shape, which is the labia minora, the inner lips. Inside the labia minora and below the glans clitoris is a small circular opening called the external urethral opening, below which is the vaginal opening in the form of circular structures arranged one above the other. The wavy type of structure to the right of the vagina opening are the remnants of the hymen, and to his left is Bartholin's gland and his ducts. So the internal female sexual structures and reproductive organs include the vagina, the uterus, the cervix, the ovaries, and the fallopian tubes. The vagina is a flexible muscular organ that encompasses the penis, and it can take in also other objects during sexual expression, and is the birth canal through which an infant is born. So the opening of the vagina, the introitus, is partially covered by a thin perforated membrane, the hymen, prior to the first intercourse or other intrusion. So first identified during the time of the Kama Sutra, published in 400 BCE, a sexual sensitive area inside the vagina and around the urethra is considered homologous to the female prostate. This is often referred to as the Graffenberg Spot. This was named after physicist Ernest Graffenberg, located on the anterior of the front wall of the vagina midway between the pubic bone and the cervix. Women who report orgasms as a result of this area being played with, or fingers gently stroking the area of the Graffenberg spot or G spot. This figure shows the internal female sexual structures. The figure shows the side profile of the hip area with the vagina of the female. The fallopian tube is a curved tube-like structure which has tentacles at one end, which are called the fimbriae, which surround the ovary in a circular form. Below the ovary is a C-like structure with the upper half and the lower half close to each other. The upper half is called the cervix and the lower half is called the uterus. To the right is a long, almost vertical structure called the rectum, which starts from the right of the cervix and ends at the bottom right, where the anus is located. Below the uterus is a bladder in a horizontal oval shape with an opening below called the urethra. To his left is a slanted white colored oblong shape called the pubic bone. Below the pubic bone is an S-shaped like structure with the top portion marked crura and the bottom portion marked clitoris glands. To the right of the urethra is a small circle on the yellow color structure, which is approximate location of the G spot. At the bottom of the tube-like structure of the urethra is the urethral opening, which is covered by the labia minora. The labia minora is covered by the labia majora. To the right of the labia minora is the vaginal opening, or also known, the scientific word is introitus, which goes up in a tube-like shape. Close to the center of the tube-like shape is the vagina. So this is the front view of the internal female sexual structure. Okay, this is the front view. So you could pause and look at some of the dimensions of the female sexual structure. Now, this figure shows a side view of the hip and vagina area of women where a person is inserting two fingers and applying a gentle pressure in the anterior wall of the vagina where the G spot is located below the urethra, known to bring most women great pleasure. To the left of the urethra is the urethra opening, the exit point for emission. At the bottom right of the pubic bone is the empty bladder in the form of a empty inverted balloon, and to its right is the uterus with the cervix at the bottom right. Between the uterus and the empty bladder in the anterior vaginal wall. At the bottom left of the anterior vaginal wall is the anus. Now, the uterus or womb is a hollow, thick-walled muscular organ. The tapered end, the cervix, extends downward and opens into the vagina. The lining of the uterine walls, the endometrium, is built up and then shed and expelled through cervical eyes opening during menstruation. In the event of pregnancy, the pre-embryo is embedded in the nourishing endometrium. On each side of the uterus is one of a pair of ovaries, the female gonads, organs that produce gametes. Gametes are sex cells containing the genetic material necessary for reproduction. At the top of the uterus are the fallopian tubes or uterine tubes. Uterine tubes, fallopian tubes, the same thing, right? They extend towards the ovaries but are not attached to them. The funnel-shaped end of each tube fans out. We call this the infundibulum. Fans out like a finger-like fimbriae, which drape over the ovary. Hair-like cilia of the fimbriae transport the ovulated oocyte egg into the fallopian tube. Now, internal structures are ovaries, pair of gonads, which are organs that produce the sex cells. Oocytes or ova, this is a term also called female gametes. Ovarian follicles, corpus luteum. The fallopian tubes are two uterine tubes, one of which receives the released oocyte. The infundibulum, the fimbriae, and the cilia. Several other important anatomical structures are in the genital areas of both men and women. Although they may not serve reproductive functions, they may be involved in sexual activities in women, and these structures include the urethra, the anus, the perineum. The urethra is a tube which urine passes. The urethral opening, or the meatus, is located between the clitoris and the vagina opening, between the vagina and the anus. The opening of the rectum, through which excrement passes, is a diamond-shaped region called the perineum. This area of soft tissue covers the muscle and ligaments of the pelvic floor. The underside of the pelvic area extended from the top of the pubic bone above the clitoris to the anus. The anus consists of two sphincters, which are circular muscles that often close like valves. The anus contains a dense supply of nerve endings that, along with the tender ring at the opening, can respond erotically. Anal sex, which involves insertion of the penis or another object into the rectum, is potentially unsafe, as in vaginal sex, because abrasions of the tissue provide easy passage for pathogens such as HIV into the bloodstream. To practice safer sex, partners who engage in anal intercourse should use a latex condom with a water-based lubricant. Now, the reproductive function of the female breast or the mammary glands is to nourish the offspring through lactation or milk production. A breast is composed of fatty tissue and 15 to 25 lobes that radiate around a central protruding nipple. Alveoli within the lobes produce milk. Around the nipple is a ring of a darkened skin called the areola. In Western cultures, women's breasts capture a significant amount of attention and serve as an erotic function. Now, this right here is the front view of the female breast. A mature female breast or mammary gland is composed of fatty tissues, 15 to 25 lobes that radiate around a central protruding nipple, right? We talked about the areola, which is that darkened circle around the nipple. And milk passes through the ducts, which open to the outside and the nipple. Now, this is a summary table of female sexual anatomy, external structures. We went over the mons pubis, the clitoris, clitoral hood, crura, corpus cavernosa, the labia majora, the labia minora, the vestibule, and Bartholin's glands. They can secrete a small amount of moisture during sexual arousal. All right, you can pause this and look at some of the definitions for vagina, introitus, hymen, the Graffenberg spot, orgy spot, the uterus, cervix, endometrium, the eyes, ovary, and gametes. Continued. Pause it. Get familiar with some of these terms. And it's cool to surprise your friends with some of this biological knowledge of the anatomy and the female reproductive system. This table has the definition for ovarian follicles, corpus luteum, fallopian tubes, infundibulum, fimbriae, cilia, ampulla. More definitions on urethra, the urethral opening, the anus, the perineum, the pelvic floor, and we've all covered these. Now, female reproductive cycle can be viewed as having two components: the ovarian cycle in which eggs develop, the menstrual or uterine cycle in which the womb is prepared for pregnancy. Now, these cycles repeat approximately every month for about 35 to 40 years. So the task of directing these processes belong to a class of chemicals called hormones, and we all have hormones. We all have testosterone and androgens, and how they work within the body sometimes can be complex. So when we talk about sex hormones, the chemical substances that serve as the messengers traveling within the body through bloodstream. Several different hormones are involved in sex and reproduction, including gonadotropin hormones that act directly on the gonads, right? They affect the maturation of the reproductive organs, menstruation, and pregnancy. Progesterone helps to maintain the uterine lining until menstruation occurs. All right, more definitions. So you could look at the definitions for estrogen, progesterone, right? Gonadotropin releasing hormones, follicle stimulating hormone. We just say FSH for short. Luteinizing hormone, human chronic gonadotropin, testosterone, oxytocin, prolaxin, right? Look up these definitions. Get familiar with it. The development of female gametes begins even before the female is even born, right? In infancy and in childhood, the cells develop into ova or eggs. So during puberty, hormones trigger the completion of the oogenesis. Some people refer to as the egg beginning. So the oogenesis results in the formation of both primary oocytes before birth and secondary oocytes as part of the ovulation. This process, called the ovarian cycle, continues until a woman reaches menopause. The development of female gametes begins even before a female is born, right? So during puberty, hormones trigger the completion of the oogenesis, the egg beginning. The oogenesis results in the formation of both primary oocytes before birth and the oocytes as part of ovulation. So this process, called the ovarian cycle, continues until a woman reaches menopause. The ovarian cycle averages 28 days in length, generally once a month, and has 4 phases: menstrual, follicle, ovulatory, and the luteal. So this diagram charts the development of an ovum in 3 stages: the mitosis, the meiosis 1, and meiosis 2, beginning with the embryonic development of the oogonia and ending with fertilization of the secondary oocyte, which then becomes the diploid zygote. So primary oocytes are present in female at birth. At puberty, hormones stimulate the oocyte to undergo meiosis. The menstrual cycle, also known as the uterine cycle, is divided into 3 phases: the menstrual, proliferative, and secretory, right? So the shedding of the endometrium marks the beginning of the menstrual phase. The menstrual flow, or menses, generally occur over a period of 3 to 5 days. Endometrial tissue builds up during the proliferative phase. It produces nutrients to sustain the embryo in the secretory phase. Women who live or work together sometimes report menstrual synchrony, right? Or the period syncing together. So you live together with a woman for some time and you end up having your period on the same week, sometimes the same days. The phenomenon may be a response to pheromones or chemicals that the body produces that can be sexually stimulated or impact the behavior of others. Right? The vast majority of women notice at least one emotional, physical, or behavioral change in a week or so before menstruation. So most women describe the changes negatively. Cultural expectations and taboos are likely involved in many cases. So menstrual problems have been attributed to Pre-Menstrual Syndrome, which we call PMS. And there's a lot of stereotypes with how women act when they're undergoing premenstrual syndrome, but it doesn't affect all women, and it does affect women differently. So which consists of a cluster of syndromes. Some women experience heavy bleeding. So this is called menorrhagia, while others have pelvic cramping, dysmenorrhea. When women do not menstruate for reasons other than ages, it's called amenorrhea. All right. So we talk about the proliferative phase. The proliferative phase typically lasts around 9 days, where the endometrium thickens in response to increased estrogen. So the secretory phase lasts about 14 days, corresponding with the luteal phase of the ovarian cycle, ends with the shedding of the endometrium. So menstrual synchrony, women who live or work together developing similar time cycles. Talked about this on the previous slide, but it appears to be related to the sense of smell, pheromones, or chemical substances secreted in the air. All right. So what we're looking at right here is the menstrual cycle, right? Is a graphic. And this is the following slide to illustrate the influence of the brain on the levels of hormones in the blood and their impact on the menstrual cycle. So here in the brain, GnRH or gonadotropin releasing hormones from the hypothalamus triggers the pituitary gland to secrete follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. Right? Pause this, read the diagram, changes during the menstrual cycle. The ovarian follicle ripens during the follicular phase, right? And during ovulation, it might swell, it ruptures, releasing the mature ovum. If fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum degenerates, right? And if you look at part E on this graphic, the endometrium begins to thicken during the proliferative phase. So if the fertilization does not occur, the endometrial cells begin to die. The secretory phase ends with the shedding of the endometrium. So check that out. Right. So for most women, notice at least one emotional, physical, or behavioral change in the week before menstruation, both negative, such as bloating, irritability, and some positive, more energy, heightened sexual arousal. Cultural expectations and taboos create negative attitudes towards menstruation and menstruating women in many parts. So, like, I always like to stop and think about the phrases that I heard that are stereotypes or insults that you hear when a woman is menstruating, right? And if you haven't experienced that, you have to allow yourself to put yourself in that person's shoes, all right? Because a lot of the stereotypes are very negative, right? And we should be supportive if somebody is, PMSing really bad or having some of the functions that are associated with heavily bleeding or prolonged bleeding. So we talked about PMS, cluster of physical, psychological system may occur 7 to 14 days before the menstrual period. But PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder is symptoms that are more severe, distinct, and they last a little bit longer. All right. What have we heard? Like women turn evil, wicked, mean, impossible to deal with. This isn't necessarily true. In reality, it affects some women very differently, and some women don't show any signs of PMS. So let's stop with the stereotypes, right? And we talked about menstrual problems. Menorrhagia is heavy or prolonged. With dysmenorrhea is pelvic cramping, right? Amenorrhea is lack of menstruation. And sometimes the cause of that could be pregnancy or breastfeeding. Secondary amenorrhea may be caused by stress, lowered body fat, heavy physical training, cysts, tumors, disease, hormonal irregulatories. So most American women use sanitary pads, panty liners, tampons to help absorb menstrual blood. So the use of tampons, which are placed inside the vagina, is linked to toxic shock syndrome, TSS, a serious bacterial infection that can occur in menstruating women. I remember the first time I saw my mother with some tampons and I didn't know what they were, thought they were toys and ended up throwing them across the room until I got in big trouble. These were, in fact, what she needed when she was menstruating. And I didn't know what tampons were at first. So alternatives include menstrual cups and sea sponges, right? These are alternative forms. So when it comes to sexuality in the menstrual cycle, people view this very different. There's a variation in how people feel about sexual activity during different phases of the menstrual cycle. So in a lot of cultures, it's considered taboo and exists that may be based on cultural beliefs or religious beliefs. Many women view menstrual sex as just another part of a committed, intimate relationship. The closer you grow with somebody, the closer that you get to somebody, it loses that taboo or what people perceive as a weird thing or a nasty thing. It's just something that people do. When you love somebody, you want to please them, no matter what they're going through. So although unusual conception can occur during menstruation, it can happen, right? Now, we talked about the female sex organs. I have been talking for a very long time. Feel free to rewind the video. Feel free to go back and check on some of the terms that you are unfamiliar with, or today might be the first time you heard some of these terms. This chapter was a mouthful, even for me. Some words I'm having a hard time pronouncing, but hopefully you were able to take some notes, and I'll see you guys on chapter 4. This is Professor Rob signing off, y'all. Peace.